Welcome to this Frequency Matters podcast. I'm Pat Hindle, and today I'm talking with Euwyn Poon. He is CEO and founder of Orbital. Welcome, Euwyn.
Thank you.
Orbital is planning to build and operate AI data centers in space, which is very interesting. You're going to use solar power and radiative cooling to remove the energy and the cooling constraints that limit terrestrial AI infrastructure. And I think you're planning on doing your launches, your first test mission in April 2027, and opening a factory in the R&D facility in Los Angeles. So I wanted to start off with you graduated from Cornell, maybe go back to your first company. That's my alma mater, so glad to see that. You started a company called Spin, and then that was sold to Ford. So can you tell us about that first venture and how it kind of became your launch pad to be a successful entrepreneur and before you came to Orbital?
I did. So I did graduate from Cornell as an engineer in computer science up in Cornell in the good old Ithaca, New York. Spent quite an amount of time there. I was actually also briefly a lawyer and not satisfied with just being in the office. Ended up moving out to San Francisco and being part of Y Combinator at an early batch. And that led to founding a company called Spin. We built this electric scooter sharing network and deployed it around the country, starting from San Francisco, Seattle, all the way to East Coast cities like DC and Miami. And we introduced this concept of these portable electric scooters that you could scan and rent on city streets and built a new form of city infrastructure. And that was wildly successful beyond my initial aspirations. And it was acquired by a Ford Motor Company and had spent quite a bit of time there learning more about manufacturing and building things at scale and learning from the best there. So that was a really exciting and fun venture, and that led me into investing in all sorts of different things, including AI infrastructure, which then led me to discover this new opportunity and this new idea of putting AI infrastructure out in orbit, which is a really fun and interesting and a little bit wild idea, I might admit, but one that will make sense. And once we apply our engineering lens to it and just kind of break it down from first principles, you'll see that there's it's somewhat inevitable that this will happen at scale.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Now that you're with Orbital, you're a founder there and CEO. So you're building the and operating AI data centers in space is the plan. What are the main motivations for this? Why is it a great idea?
It's really about scaling compute, and we're really hitting constraints here in the US and around the world and being able to build enough AI infrastructure to support the demands. I think that in the last, really, this is all happening very quickly. In the past year or even the past few months, the demand for inference in particular as a form of using AI models. So in the last few years, we've been spending a lot of compute training models, all the big AI labs from your OpenAI to Anthropic's and other open weights labs have been training models and spending a ton of compute in getting these models ready. And we've, in these last few months, since December or so, since Opus 4.6 and others that have come out, we've hit this crazy inflection point where these models are now extremely useful for not just conversation, but actually in running businesses from enterprise systems to all the way from running desktops. And it's incredible how useful these models are. And we've just seen the demand for inference skyrocket. And it's very clear that we're running out of compute capacity there. Nuclear facilities, we're running out of energy. Both nuclear facilities take a long time to permit and build here in the US. Data centers take time and cost to stand up. They consume electricities. A lot of communities don't really want them in their backyards. So we naturally just look upwards for a ton of available energy that we've not really harnessed to date. And if there are a lot of challenges to get this up and running, but the end state is clear to me that we will see us being able to tap into compute in orbit in the very near future.
So yeah, with power being the primary driver, can you use solar panels to provide enough energy to power the computing? And, is the cooling going to work there in a vacuum okay?
Yeah, so these are interesting engineering challenges. Obviously, in space, you don't have convection and conduction. You're operating in vacuum. It is cold up there, but you lack the traditional methods of cooling. So radiators are the answer. So in our satellite design, we pair fairly large solar panels with fairly large radiator to cool. And part of our big focus is actually designing the thermal systems in order to conduct heat from the GPUs out into the radiators and out into the darkness of space, that's an elegant on that front. In terms of getting enough solar power, that's just simply getting enough surface area of solar arrays in order to power the GPUs. So we're talking about solar panels, the surface area of roughly a tennis court, say cut into 4 strips, if you can imagine that. So fairly large still, but still beneath what's, not humongous and still within the realm of feasibility in terms of building. So yes, and also in orbit, you do have higher irradiance up above the atmosphere. So that plays into the equation. And also another brilliant thing up in orbit, in sun synchronous orbit, you get 24/7 sunlight if you operate along a certain orbit, and that certainly beats, well, if you remember Ithaca, we definitely didn't get much sun.
No,
So
we
it
didn't. It was
beats
quite
the
cold.
6 hours or so of sunlight that you get. And yeah, it all seems to point to the right direction.
Well, the power is free at least. You don't have to pay for that part.
It is. So yeah, it's a trade-off between the cost of launch and your power bill. And data centers pay a lot of electricity bills.
And so, how are these GPUs and supporting electronics going to withstand like the radiation environment?
That's the other tricky part here, and this is something an active area of R&D and work for us as well. Obviously, out in space, you do have radiation that could lead to adverse effects like bit flips in these sensitive GPU chips, and both in the satellite bus and covering the chips themselves, will need to incorporate materials, whether it's aluminum and others, to properly shield these from bit flips. Thankfully, the use case that we're targeting of inference is somewhat resistant to, it's not prone to compounding issues, say that you would have if we were doing model training. So that plays in our favor a bit. Inference is largely stateless, but still, we still need to figure out better ways of protecting against radiation.
And so you mentioned it's kind of a trade-off between launch costs and, the power to power all these, how is it cost effective to, be able to launch and maintain AI computing in space? Do you have any, rough numbers about how it makes sense?
Yeah, it's not cost effective today. And with today's technology and the cost to launch aboard a Falcon 9, we're talking about $7,000 a kilogram to launch things up. Pretty cost prohibitive right now. But with new launch capabilities of Starship coming online, and Elon has promised to get us down to about $10 a kilogram, that certainly tips the scales largely in the favor. And when realizing that the cost of maintenance is largely free and the cost of power is free up in space and cooling, that things will flip very quickly once we get Starship online and others, hopefully other launch vehicles online and systems to get us moving things at scale into orbit.
Wow, that's a big cost difference. I didn't realize it was going to come down that quickly.
Yeah, it's a great time to be working in this space, and a lot of people are excited about what this means for the entire industry.
So let's talk about the data. How will you get all this data back to Earth?
There are systems and more going up. I guess AWS even has something neatly called AWS Ground System that has several, maybe I think it was 10 nodes around the world that have up and down links to satellite systems, and more companies are building this capability. So that's largely a solved problem, actually. And it's actually pretty relatively easy to transmit bits. Now, it's hard to transmit energy from orbit down to Earth, and I think the neat idea and one of the coolest ideas that I've come across in this space is the fact that we are converting energy into bits up in orbit in a readily transmittable form. And that's enabling us as a civilization to really harness energy at a much greater scale than ever possible.
And so what about with the data coming back? Isn't there a big latency issue with it coming, or is it just that you're going to do all the training up there and then you don't worry that much about latency?
So inference is what we're focusing on, and so in terms of latency, it's less of a concern for us. Inference is largely compute bound, meaning the bottleneck is at the GPU level. So we're talking about even up to a second or several seconds of compute. You can tell this when you're using your own ChatGPT. It takes a while to think, and that's largely not latency. That's processing at the GPU level. So if we're talking about millisecond latency, that's minute in comparison to the lag that's on the GPU.
And so how about your network of satellites? Are they going to be connected to each other? Are they going to transmit data or be able to coordinate between each other and transmit back, or how is that going to be set up?
That's right. So optical interlinks between the constellation of satellites, and we have communications in really two layers. You can think about that way. Optical interlinks for communication and relays between the satellites themselves, and then depending on who has visibility to a ground station, the up and down links to transmit the data back to Earth. So both in a vertical way and a really a horizontal way of communication.
Complete network.
Yeah.
And so I think we mentioned that your first test mission is planned for April 2027. Can you maybe, kind of review the overall timeline of your company and how it will expand over the years?
Yeah, everything's coming together very, very quickly. Launching our first payload in April 2027, looking to get our first satellite that we design and build in the 28 time frame, and then we'll try to get to commercial viability and scale by the end of the decade, which is coming up fairly fast.
Yes, time always flies faster than you want it to.
Yep.
So any other things about futuristic looking? I mean, you're really kind of, looking far into the future and really meeting needs that you see coming. Are there any other things you see in space or computing, AI computing that need to be addressed?
I think and the reason why I chose to work on this, everything stems back down to energy. I think there are tremendous cool applications that we're seeing of AI. I just think that it's going to be a really fun time as we stretch into this time of abundance with AI really handling a lot of the more menial tasks and automating away a lot of the things that we traditionally have not had fun doing.
Yeah, it's been such an advance in the last year. I mean, I remember using ChatGPT a year ago, and it was like, it had been trained on data that was 5 years old, so it wasn't really that useful. And they look at it today, it's amazing what it can do for you.
It is, yep.
Okay, well, thank you, Ewan, for talking with me today about putting AI data centers in space, an exciting new area. So we wish you the best of luck in the new venture, and hopefully we can catch up with you maybe in a year to see how you're progressing along.
Of course, we'll do.
To our listeners, you can find more podcasts at podcast.microwavejournal.com. Thanks for listening.